video we'll have a look at both the multi-item sorter as well as the loading system that can take either shulkers, empty or full items, whatever you chuck in it at the end of your mining session, and sort it all into the sorting system. So first of all, this is cheap. The main goal of this is to make something that you'd be able to build fairly early in game rather than waiting until you've got a lot of resources. It's also small. The depth from front to back is as small as I could make it. It's expandable, so you should be able to do 14 by 12 double chests. So that's 12 across and it could be 12 high now that I think about it. It's robust, as in there's not a lot of delicate timing, so there is a very precise timing, but it's all in one clock. So adding extra height or width shouldn't break the system too much. You've got a little bit of leeway here and there. It's fast. This is due to the smallness of it, because the distance front to back has been kept to a minimum. It means that there's less time the items are sitting in hoppers and more time they're trying to be inserted in chests. So it really means that the items for the most part are just trying to be inserted into chests and not much else. And while this design isn't silent, it can very easily be made silent, although it is at a cost of 2 rows of chests. But I'll talk about that a bit later. So let's have a look at how it works. So in here we have some shulker boxes and some items. So we've just gone back from mining in the nether. We've put some items in a red shulker box, small items. We've got 1 item in there, an empty shulker box, and 32 other items. And in our multi-item sorter, we can see that there's no room for these items in any of these first few chests. When it gets to here, we've got some room for the redstone components and the nylium here. What will happen is the items will be removed from the shulker boxes. Shulker boxes will turn up here and the items will be attempted to be inserted into the chest. Let's just chuck all of this in here. Now we can see that as the items come through, the item sorter has already started, and we should see the first chest come in for loading soon. Or not. Anyway, we'll have a look. We should be getting some items through at the very least. So there's some of the nylium. Haven't got any of the redstone components through yet. More nylium. Oh, there's one of the first shulker boxes coming through. So the red one's being unloaded now. And that means we should be seeing some of the shulker boxes here. So the empty ones come up. Still running on some of the redstone, but the nylium's still coming through. We now have all 4 shulker boxes here, and as you can see, they've all been emptied out. When the ticking stops, we should get the last of the nylium in. Let's give it a little longer. There it is. There's the redstone coming in. And we've got all the nylium here. Now the ticking you're hearing is from this top row of droppers. Well, this allows us to have these top rows of chests. If you change these droppers over to hoppers, the system becomes silent, but you also get the disadvantage that you can't use these top 2 rows of chests. So that should be all items in very, very shortly. And that's all the items. So we've got all the items here that we had in our shulker boxes, and all our shulker boxes over here. So next up, let's look at how we build and what it costs to build a system that's 5 chests across and 4 chests high. So here we are at our system where we're going to build a new sorting item. Now I've set these up as single chests because we need to know where we're going to be putting our hoppers, but you can either make them double chests going that way, double chests going that way, or you can bring them forward this way. Now there are systems that let you have this with no gaps between. However, for me, I don't really like those systems. You get nowhere to put your item frames, and by making it this way, by gaining that gap, we also reduce the cost of materials quite a lot. We have our input chest and output chest, and below here we've mapped out where we're going to put our multi-item sorter, as well as our unloading system. There needs to be a gap between the two. Multi-item sorter is 1 brick higher, 1 brick on the outside of where the chests are going to be, and a total of 9 back. I've got the items we need to build it over here. So for these 20 double chests, we need 45 hoppers, 5 observers, droppers, target blocks, comparators and repeaters. These items I haven't counted out simply because they're so cheap. So let's get started. So the first thing you need to do is deal with the way the pulse delay goes to all the chests. So we need to create a output line across here. This is going to be the output line for our signals up the towers, and then we alternate with 1 and 2, 1 and 2, and then we need to make sure that this is 6 ticks ahead of that, 6 ticks behind that. So 4 and 3, 4 and 3, 4 and 3. So these are running at 6 ticks behind this one. Now we'll do our output signal. So this is part of the clock. So the clock requires an observer feeding into a repeater. This extends the pulse so that instead of getting a single pulse you get a longer pulse, and that's observing our clock. Now the clock is a little bit specific. We have a block there and a block there. We have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, comparator on subtract mode, and then the signal feeding back into there. Then finally we have our fader clock. So we'll put a block here, and then a, oh no, we can't do that, we need a repeater, sorry, repeater, block, line. Now because we're only going 4 high, we only need like a very small, those should be comparators. We only need a very small fader because it doesn't take very long for the items to come around, so that should be enough. If you have more chests, you need more comparators here basically. And then we just need something in to make the signal strong, so we'll put that there. Now we can test this at the moment, so we get ourselves a lever. And we'll just put that on. And the best way we can test it is with a redstone lamp. So this isn't part of the design, but it is useful for testing. So I'm just going to put my target box in here for the moment. So what you want to see is never have both lamps off, but that alternating pattern. So that shows us that our clock is working. We can put those back up. And we can turn that off. So the next thing we need is the signal line. So this is going to be the line that causes the whole thing to run. Now the signal line runs right behind the chest. So the first dropper tower is just going to be this side of that chest. So it starts here. And the last one's going to be just this side of this chest. So it stops there. And the last thing is we need to make sure that we don't jump back up, so the signal line should only really come in at the end. And it's basically as simple as that. If you're making a longer system, you'd feed in the signal line from this way and that way to be able to get that extended pulse this way. Likewise, if you were having more chests, you'd build as far as you could this way, but you'd also build as far as you could this way off this part here. And that's the bottom layer more or less done. So the next bit is to start raising our towers. So we need to start having these signals come up. So there, 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 and there. We're going to grab some slabs for the next step up. We're just going to come across here. Now, we aren't going to keep all of these, it's just a lot easier to remember the pattern if you do it this way. Because it's easier to fill them all in and then get rid of some. Now the reason we come this way for this level, even though we're coming through the floor, is we can't afford this signal to fall into our droppers, so we go this way for the first step up. We'll very quickly get rid of all those excess slabs, and then we'll start on the next layer. The next layer is over here. and unfortunately because of the redstone there we can't simply go straight up over. So we'll do those and then we'll come back and we'll fill in the extra ones where we need them. Again, we'll just do our redstone and get rid of our excess, so we don't want those. We do want that, not that one, not that one, that one, not that one, that one, not that one, that one. Okay, we are now ready to do our hoppers and our target blocks. So, we need hoppers going into input into each of these chests. I'll just quickly do that. And then we need some lock hoppers underneath. So this is the hopper that prevents the item flying out of the system while the bottom chests are checked. So we've got an input hopper for each one and then a lock hopper for each one sitting beneath that input hopper. Some are both inputs and locks. So now we need to put target blocks against each of the lock hoppers so that they can be activated, so to speak. Now we don't need to do the top row because there's no hopper underneath them, so we're only doing the ones that have a hopper above them. And that in essence is the hoppers. We'll now add some droppers. And once we have the droppers in, we can start doing our redstone ladders. So now we need to run alternating signals up so that there's a piece of redstone going into every target block. We won't do this one here because we'll do that off the other side. Okay, and then we add the redstone. One of the advantages of not finishing off both sides of the chest is you can come around this side and check which ones you've missed. As we can see, there's a bit of redstone going into each target block. We now run another system test, so I'll grab our lever again, turn the system on. And what we're looking for is every piece of redstone lit up. So we know we haven't missed any. We'll also turn our system on and do our second test. So the second way you can test the system is you can put lamps on the other side of these target blocks. And that's basically the pattern you're looking for. So when the light's on, it's representing that the hopper is locked. So you never want two hoppers unlocked one above the other, but you do want them alternating that off pattern because that's the time the hopper will attempt to put an item in the chest. So we can see that that's all built correctly, so we can turn off our system test again. Okay, so the next thing we need to do then is our dropper towers. But before we do that, we're just going to build a small platform up above to build the dropper towers on. So we'll start one there. Going to be a dropper tower here but not over, so we won't go any further than that. And we'll just run 3 wide all the way back. Now it doesn't matter that there's a full block there. The main reason we're doing slabs is to prevent interference downwards. Okay, and that's for the last dropper tower. So now we can quickly put our dropper towers in. So the first one goes here. And just get space and shift working for me again. Last one comes over sideways. And then I'll repeat the pattern for the other 4 towers. Okay, so we now have droppers coming up. We'll use our hoppers to feed in. So now we feed from the dropper towers up into that dropper, waits until that activates and locks that, feeds into here. It'll attempt this chest first while that's still locked, and then when the pulse alternates, this will become unlocked, and we'll try this chest with that one locked, and so on and so forth. So now we just need to make sure that the item goes up and close the loop. So as we come down, we feed into this this drop over here. We just do that for each row. We don't have to do it for this one here because it's the last one. In fact, we'll also just destroy that hopper because we don't need a lock hopper there. So now we have a complete path for the items to go around through the multi-item sorter. Now we just need to power the dropper towers. So bring back our compounder and our repeaters. So compounders, thank you very much. And then our repeaters. The reason we have repeaters is we need a strong signal for that signal line to start the clock. So we'll then put some blocks here, which will ensure that if there's an item in any of the droppers, the signal line's turned on and the clock is started. Now the clock is taken from Gnembon's multi-item sorter design. I haven't designed this clock, it's direct from Gnembon's. And so are the towers. I've basically just taken the towers. What I've adjusted is the feed into the chests. So we have the signal going to the clock, so we now need to do our tower signal. So we need our torches again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and repeaters on top. Each repeater at 4 ticks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we can put some blocks over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and some torches. So this is the start of the dropper elevators. These torches, when they update, help make the item go up. And then the last thing we need to do is create our clock. So the idea is each dropper elevator has its own clock, and if more than one item falls under the bottom of the elevator, it'll still continue to run and get all the items up. But the reason we do these repeaters at 4 ticks, and the next repeaters will be doing ours also at 4 ticks, is so that they don't flood the hoppers. Because one of the interesting things about multi-item sorters is you can only have one item in a hopper at a time, so you need to sort of throttle the system such that that's true. Those top blocks will be getting away. I've just gotten them to make it easier. Sorry, no, I need one more. And this is just to make it easier for me to do my observers. So observer there, 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 and there, into blocks. Then we can get rid of these top ones because they'll just help us put the observers down, and we'll put our repeaters here. Still on 4 ticks. Let's double check they're all on 4 ticks. Now we can finish our elevator design. So we need to make sure that every second row rather, has a torch. And the torches are part of a torch tower such that when the clock cycles, the signal is elevated. So that won't take very long to do, so I'll just do that quickly. And finally our last set of torches. And that completes our multi-item sorter. So at this point, we can give it a quick test. So we can see in the first test we've got some orange wool and some pink wool in the second test. So we'll grab ourselves some wool. Pink and orange. And add 1 pink and 1 orange and see that they go to the right chests. So we haven't got our unloader set up, so we'll just insert them directly into the hopper for now. So 1, 2, 3, and 1. So we should get 3 and 1, so there's our 3 orange, and there's our 1 pink. And you can continue the test for the other rows, but for now, this is basically the completed multi-item sorter. and we can start looking at our unloader. So for our unloader we need some different items. Not quite as many, it's still pretty cheap. And I will just grab some of them because I don't have the shulker or that, or the barrel. And this one also uses a dispenser. The rest of these items I still have left over because I'm in creative mode. So the multi-item sorter needs 4 blocks below the level of the item chest, however the shulker unloader needs a little bit more. So here's a hole I've dug earlier, because I'm sure you all know how to dig down a 3 wide hole. So the best way to make sure you get this in the right place is just basically to start at the input. So 2 hoppers over, and then we go back to our droppers, which are here. So we're going to have 1 dropper facing in this way, and it's going to come up to here, and then there's going to be a towel all the way from the floor here, and all the way from the floor here. And this one's going to be too high. The reason it's going to be too high is this is the one that's going to feed back into our shulker chest. So now we've done that, we can start looking at the bottom layer. So 1, 2, and then we can have our piston on the wall over here. This is what's going to break our shulker box when it's full. Then we'll have our item on the floor. So this is what's going to power our piston. Run some 2 redstone this way. Then we also need some slabs. Oops, just put that dropper back in. And doing this system, always double check that you are using the right dropper or dispenser. There's only 1 dispenser, and if you get it wrong it's kind of embarrassing. So we need a dispenser facing down. Dispenser and piston to break the block once it's finished. So the next thing we need is a comparator to check if there's any items in the piston, and a wall block so this allows it so that when there's items here in a shulker box, the piston is held so that it doesn't break. We also need a target block here and some extra slabs. So the purpose of the slabs is just simply to give it a place to put a comparator clock. And just get on the edge there. So it's a comparator clock, so we're going to have it in subtract mode with a repeater facing directly into it. And the reason we do this is if for whatever reason that ever becomes full, this needs to be on subtract mode with a 15 strength signal to be able to turn it off. And that's basically the only reason. Go on a signal. And we're going to change this to an 8-tick clock, simply so that when the shulker goes here, there is definitely enough time for both the hoppers to reset themselves and be ready to accept new items. If you have this set too tight, what can happen is the piston will push the shulker box and try to break it, but the hopper won't be ready to receive it yet and it'll just float there. As is often the case with Minecraft, sometimes you think of an improvement to a system after you've built it. In this case, we're just going to make it a little bit easier for the piston to push the busted shulker box here such that it doesn't run into a slab. So we're just going to use scaffolding for this purpose, since items can move through scaffolding. And we're also going to add a little bit of additional glass just to try and focus the shulker box where we want it. So we'll just do that. Just put some wool here, here, and here as well. Now we can finish building up, and we'll just put glass here, here, and here, and then we can go back to slabs over here. We just need to rebuild our clock. So there. So essentially the same as before, except now the the comparator is now sitting on a scaffolding block rather than a slab, just simply because it'll make it easier for the piston to ensure it pushes the broken shulker box on top of this hopper. And that should be a slightly more reliable design. Okay, so what's happening here is the shulker turns up here, starts the clock, which forces the dispenser to fire and the piston to turn off, allowing the shulker box to be set here. If it's empty, when the clock runs out, the piston will push it, but also lock this up at the same time, forcing it into the second set of hoppers. If there is items, then the comparator will hold it until it's empty and then push it over, and all the items will go into this tower. So now we can have a look at the next one up. Now the next layer up, we're going to add a little bit of a buffer to. So we'll go a hopper, and a barrel, and then a hopper. Now the reason we do this is so if there's a lot of shulker boxes and take a while to load up, they've got somewhere to back up. So our shulker boxes will go down here, but we want our items over here. So because we want our items over here, we're going to put a shulker box over here. Now what happens is the shulker box can have anything put in it except a shulker box. So we can actually use the shulker box as sorting for shulker boxes. Now I'm just going to leave that. So we're going to have a dropper, and the dropper is going to attempt to insert into the shulker box. Most of the time it will fail. And then I'll just come around here and have another dropper facing down. So what we want is this dropper to be directly powered, so the item is moved from here to here and then immediately attempted to move there. If it fails, the hoppers will take it, but because this is directly powered, it should go straight here before the hoppers get a chance of having a look in. So we need to add another layer of slabs for another clock. Now this layer is a little bit more simpler than the last, because while we do need our comparator based clock in subtract mode again, it's not nearly as finicky. We don't have to put any special timing on it. We're just trying to loop the signal so that as long as that's full, it keeps sending items down, and the system should be fast enough that they just flow through. If you do run into systems, you can always adjust the clock though, like make the clock a little bit slower. So we now have our shulker item separator, shulker unloader, which also separates, and feeding into these droppers. So the next thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we can feed items from this chest into there, and this dropper into here. So for that, we'll just put a hopper there, and a hopper here, and a hopper here and here. And now we need to power these towers. Now they're a little bit different from this one simply because we don't actually have to power any sort of a clock line. So instead of doing this, we can actually move that out one more and save ourselves a bit of redstone. So just make sure my torches as well. And torches, repeaters. We're still going to use the same clock. It's not really necessary, but if you only have to remember one clock, it just makes life a little bit easier. We'll put our observers in now. Check they're both facing downwards, put the repeaters on top of those. And then we need to add our blocks and our torches. Torch, 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 torch. block, block, torch, torch. And then we just build up the redstone towers. Now the only other interesting thing here is our redstone towers aren't going to be as tall as each other, because this tower needs to go up another 2 higher than the other tower. So I don't need that block or that torch. I don't need that torch. There. There. Now I'm just going to check both towers, make sure I haven't missed any torches. Yep, that looks correct. So now we just need to do this other tower. So I'm just going to use slabs. I always recommend using slabs if you don't need a full block, simply because there's less chance of accidentally powering something you didn't mean to. And it's always annoying when you power something you didn't mean to. Nice thing about Gnembon's dropper tower design is they're both silent, but they can be placed right next to each other without any real hassle, which really helps save on the space. Now, because this is only 2 high, it's a really small tower, most of the rest of this is really just about running the clock. So we need our observer over here, and our repeater. Check that they're both on 4 ticks, and that should be it. So the next thing up is to test it. So we now have the items to go test to see if this works. So we have an empty shulker box, a shulker with just a few items, some more cyan wool, so that's 32 cyan altogether, and some magenta wool. That should sort into the magenta wool here and the cyan wool here. We'll just chuck that all in. As you can hear, shulker boxes are being unloaded down there. Just put in some extra glass. And we should be getting our first shulker box up here. There's the red shulker box. I've just heard another one go, so we should see another one in a second. There's our yellow shulker box, and there's our green shulker box. So all 3 of our shulker boxes have been unloaded. And we can see that our magenta wool is turning up here, and our cyan wool is turning up here. So that is the multi-item sorter and unloader all done. So thank you for watching this tutorial on how to build a multi-item sorter, taking advantage of the new target block out of 1.16.